What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with What If Deku story. What if Deku's quirk awakened after Uraraka betrayed him, and he was loved by the Queen of Dragons? If you enjoyed then please like, share and do comments. As he sat on the bus, Izuku still couldn't believe he was actually about to take the entrance exam for UA. True, the green-haired, green-eyed, freckled-faced, previously quirkless boy had spent much of the previous year training with his personal idol, the number 1 ranked hero All Might, whose real name is Toshinori Yagi, to strengthen his body so that he may have the strength-giving quirk, one for all, passed down to him. Still, it had been tough, Izuku only barely clearing the beach of all the garbage that morning, showing Toshinori that the boy possessed the strength to handle the quirk. Despite this, Izuku couldn't help but remember an incident during his training that not only renewed his hopes of being a hero but also showed that such a dream wasn't impossible. As he had been doing for the past 6 months, Izuku had been training while Toshinori coached him. Given that it was a Sunday, that meant training began earlier than usual. After a quick, but large, breakfast with his mother, Izuku ran to the beach where he spent a few hours hauling garbage from the sand to All Might's truck. After a brief drive to the dump, where the teen unloaded the heavy trash unassisted, Toshinori decided today's exercises would focus on endurance and cardio. As such, Izuku now wore his light green track suit as he jogged in the park behind All Might, the hero in his non-buff appearance wearing a large black coat as he rode a Segway. Thus far the jog had been relatively quiet, save for Izuku's labored breathing after the first few hours of jogging without a break. That changed when a voice from behind the pair called out, "Hey! Stop him!" Turning, Izuku saw a man wearing a black tracksuit with a hood pulled up to hide his face running towards him. A more important detail was that the man was clutching a purse that obviously wasn't his. Like he'd done in his attempt to save his friend from the slime villain, Izuku acted without thinking. While continuing to jog forward, the boy angled himself to intercept the purse snatcher. When the man got close enough, Izuku stuck out his right leg, tripping the man. However, due to the purse snatcher's style of running, the man's left arm caught Izuku across the back, bringing the boy down to the ground as well. Recovering first, Izuku quickly put the thief in a sloppy armlock to keep the man down. Thankfully the robber didn't possess any quirk that would have rendered the tactic useless. By now Toshinori had gotten off his Segway and the purse snatcher's victim had caught up to the group. Getting a look at the would-be victim, Izuku noted she was a girl around his age with bright pink skin and curly pink hair with a pair of small yellow horns sticking out from among the curls. However, perhaps the girl's most distinctive feature was her eyes, a bright yellow iris surrounded by black sclera. Matching the girl's unique looks was her equally unique dress, as despite the rather cold weather she chose to wear a pair of denim shorts and black leggings along with a black short-sleeved shirt that read, "Acid," in white letters. In the time it took for Izuku to observe the girl in front of him, Toshinori had easily undone his apprentice's submission hold before putting the would-be thief in a hold of his own, one for all, giving the man incredible strength despite his skeletal-like appearance. "Right, young Midoriya, take a break while I take care of this," was all the man said as he awkwardly shuffled off. Left alone with the girl, and still gasping from his non-stop jog, Izuku didn't know what to say. Luckily he wasn't the one to speak up first. As she reclaimed her purse, the pink-skinned girl said, "Well, thanks for that. I would have caught up to the guy myself, but I didn't want to ruin these shoes." Now Izuku was shocked. Due to his quirkless nature and his high grades, most people his own age didn't tend to willingly associate with him, much less girls. Confused at the boy's continued silence, the girl raised an eyebrow and leaned forward as she asked, "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" Instead of allowing Izuku an opportunity to answer, the other teen smiled and declared, "So Midori is your family name? Could I get a first name to go with it? Mine's Mina Ishido if you're curious, and I can wait until you remember how to speak." Just as she finished speaking, a buzzing came from Mina's bag. Quickly pulling out her cell phone, the teen skimmed over a text message before saying, "Whoops, looks like I actually don't." Turning back to Izuku, Mina gave the boy one more smile before saying, "Well, see ya later, Hiro-kun." The girl's next actions only served to shock Izuku further. Faster than he anticipated, Mina moved in front of the boy and leaned forward just slightly to plant a kiss on his cheek before running off. Stunned, all Izuku could do was place his hand on his cheek and watch as Mina rushed away. Just then All Might returned to continue his coaching. As Izuku continued his jog, he had a stray thought in his head. He wanted to become a hero to help others, but it certainly was nice to be thanked. Shaking his head of the memories, Izuku noticed that the bus had stopped, and he was one of the last still on. After quickly getting off, he scanned the crowd. Truthfully, he was a little glad that he didn't see Katsuki among his group. As much as he liked his friend, the boy had been a bit more hostile after the slime villain incident. Also absent among his group was Mina, who Izuku could have sworn he'd seen back during the orientation. However, there was some happiness as the teen recognized the brown-haired girl who'd used her gravity manipulation quirk to stop Izuku from tripping on his feet from earlier. As the boy was about to go over and thank the girl for helping him, and actually give her his name, he was stopped by a heavy hand on his shoulder. Turning, Izuku faced the last person he recognized, a tall bespectacled boy with short blue hair and what looked like exhaust pipes sticking out of his calves. Before Izuku could say anything, the taller boy said, "You were going to distract her, weren't you?" Before Izuku could deny the accusation, everyone heard Present Mike, the loudspeaker hero who dressed in a leather jacket to match his outrageous hair and sunglasses and was currently serving as the proctor for the exam, declare, "Begin." Unlike everyone around him, Izuku didn't hesitate, charging forward into the mock city to face the robotic drones. The teen had perhaps a 10-second head start on the competition as Present Mike asked, "What? You all expected a countdown. That doesn't happen in the real world, so it won't happen here." Despite the head start, Izuku was soon overtaken by a few would-be students who had speed-related quirks, the tall boy among them. Keeping his mind on task, Izuku ignored those passing him as he charged forward. Soon he came upon his first drone, one of the three-legged variety worth 2 points. As the robot took notice of him, Izuku charged forward, all the while thinking, "I can do this, I can do this." As the robot brought up one of its limbs to try and smack the boy away, Izuku ducked below the limb as he charged forward. Easily seeing where the limb connecting, and thankful the drone's main body was so close to the ground, the teen grabbed the exposed joint and tried to access One for All as he tore the metal apart. Believing himself to have accessed the quirk, Izuku used the detached limb as an impromptu weapon to decapitate the robot's head, earning himself 2 points as the drone collapsed. Hearing clapping behind him, Izuku turned to see a blonde-haired boy wearing a ruffled white shirt and a belt with a large gem on it. "Magnifique, my friend. The first victory is yours, but this one is mine." With a smooth motion, the blonde boy shot his stomach forward, a laser shooting from the gem and hitting a 1-point robot. For half a moment the pair stared at one another, before Izuku threw his defeated foe's limb above the other boy, hitting a 3-point enemy directly in the head and disabling the robot before it could attack either boy and bringing Izuku's total up to 5 points. At seeing Izuku's show of strength, the laser user gave him a brief look before saying, "Touché," and running off. However, Izuku didn't pay the comment too much attention, he had a test to finish. In the control room where all the testing areas were being observed, UA's principal, some sort of animal, the running theory being either a mouse, dog or cat with a large scare over his right eye, Nezu observed Izuku's strength as he commented to All Might, "Though you said the boy was quirkless, while nowhere near the power of One for All, that strength is still superhuman. That is what young Midoriya told me." Toshinori stated, defending himself as he added, "And he certainly never showed this much strength during our training. Perhaps he had a psychological block. Something for Recovery Girl to investigate." Nezu stated, ending the matter before a sadistic grin appeared on his face. In any case, it's time for the real test to begin. The animal barely kept the grin off their face as they pressed a large red button on the control panel. As he was racing around the city trying to find more mock villains to defeat, Izuku was feeling pretty confident. In the course of the test he'd earned 17 points, enough to guarantee admittance to UA, but not for the hero course. Still, despite seeing the nice girl from earlier, who had a gravity-based quirk much like his mother's, and the speedster from earlier racking up their own points, the inheritor of One for All was confident he could find a few more robots to get his score up to at least 20. That confidence vanished as he felt the ground shake. Izuku wasn't the only person to notice this either. All heads turned to the center of the fake city to see a gigantic robot emerge from the ground. Instantly the teens recognized it as the 0-point gimmick robot, the one that would only attack when something was near. Of course, given its size everyone was near the robot. Following its programming, the 0 Point stomped towards the nearest group of test-takers, creating craters and rubble. At seeing such a daunting task, practically everyone ran away, save for a few. Izuku was about to join the crowd and run away, until he noticed the gravity girl had her leg trapped under a large piece of rubble. The boy knew he was too far away to pull her out, which left one option. I'm going to need all my strength for this, Izuku thought to himself as he crouched down, tensing all the muscles in his body in preparation to jump, unknowingly using one for all for the first time. The speedster noticed this odd behavior, but the green-haired teen jumped before he could be told off once more. As soon as he was airborne, Izuku felt pain. Legs are probably broken, and it feels like I probably pulled something in my back. After that thought, the teen added that the wind was causing an unpleasant feeling on his face. He also wondered if he was getting enough oxygen, as he believed he was hallucinating at seeing his arm being encased in a golden glow. Those thoughts stopped as he closed the distance to his target. Rearing back his right arm, the would-be student put all his strength into the single blow as he hit the robot's face, obliterating the gimmick and breaking his arm in the process. Although now having 3 broken limbs, the curly-haired boy had a more immediate concern, namely the ground rushing up to meet him. Desperately he tried to angle his body flat and increase his drag to try and slow down, but he only succeeded in putting himself into a spiral descent. Running out of time, the teen braced for impact, only to feel someone slap his cheek. Turning, he saw the girl he rescued, still trapped by rubble but now floating in the air, quickly activate her quirk, stopping all his momentum. Both teens hung in the air for a split second before the girl put her hands together and said, "Release," causing both teens to fall to the ground. While Izuku tried to push himself up with his remaining limb, the effort of using her quirk seemed to be too much for the girl as she began throwing up. After seeing the display of such powerful quirks, the rest of the examinees were stunned into silence. As such, Izuku didn't have any trouble hearing a loud horn, followed by Present Mic declaring the test over. Just as he passed out, the boy mumbled his desire to have a few more points. It had been a week since the entrance exams, and Izuku was uncharacteristically quiet during that time. Despite his limbs being healed by Recovery Girl, UA's resident nurse, the teen still had a dark cloud hanging above him as he was sure he wouldn't be admitted into the hero course. Inko was growing concerned by her son's behavior and was getting ready to schedule a doctor's appointment when she heard someone knock on the door. Not expecting company, the woman opened the door to reveal a much older woman who was half her height, a unique set of glasses that seemed to be made of one lens stretched across her eyes, had her hair styled in a bun with a syringe holding it in place, a white coat, and using a large syringe as a walking stick. Not forgetting her manners, Inko asked, "Yes, what may I do for you?" "This is the Midoriya residence, correct?" the other woman asked. Upon seeing Inko nod her head, the woman asked, "Then may I come in? I have some things I need to discuss with you and your son regarding his recent application for UA." Upon hearing this, Inko quickly led the woman into the living room before retrieving Izuku from his room. Upon seeing the woman, and immediately recognizing her as Recovery Girl, Izuku immediately thanked her for healing his injuries only to be waved off as her doing her job. Turning her attention to Inko, Recovery Girl asked, "Now after reviewing the footage from last week, could you please tell me why your son is listed quirkless?" "That's what our doctor said when Izuku was 4. Inko explained. "I was concerned that Izuku hadn't shown signs of manifesting a quirk, so I made an emergency appointment. Let me guess, he took an X-ray of your son's feet and proclaimed him quirkless due to an extra joint in his pinky toe." Recovery Girl didn't so much ask as state. When both Inko and her son nodded yes, the nurse continued, "And your predication was probably close to retirement, weren't they?" After thinking for a few moments, Inko answered, "Maybe. After he said my son was quirkless we were transferred to a different department." What the pair heard next shocked them. "Then let me be the first to tell you your son does indeed have a quirk." At seeing the unbelieving glances, Recovery Girl explained, "Don't look so surprised, late bloomers aren't so rare in the West. Some quirks just take longer to manifest." "But my pinky toe," Izuku weakly began. Quickly turning to the boy, Recovery Girl stated, "You need to understand correlation does not mean causation. When quirks first began appearing in over 50% of newborns, the extra joint was quickly noticed and many latched upon the idea. Yet just a few years later, when the total quirk population was around 75% of the world, evidence emerged that contradicted the theory. Despite this, and the fact several American heroes have the extra joint, many doctors still teach this flawed idea, especially those close to retiring and looking to shuffle patients around. Knowing that Recovery Girl hadn't been referring to one for all, and not noticing anything different during the test, Izuku asked, "So then what is my quirk? The staff of UA have a general idea, but I'm here to see the full extent of your power." Recovery Girl explained as she stood up. As she walked in front of Izuku, she pulled out a small flashlight and a tongue depressor from her coat pocket. "No, please say, ah." Following instructions, the teen opened his mouth and stuck his tongue out. As she looked at the younger Midoriya's throat, Recovery Girl noted the bright red color and asked, "Did your son often have a sore throat as a child?" As she nodded yes, Inko elaborated, after his 4th birthday he complained terribly about his throat at least once a week. Though he had strep but every test came back negative. Gradually the aches went away and stopped around his 7th year in school. Nodding at the information, Recovery Girl turned her attention back to Izuku, noting a rather large bump along either side of the boy's throat, just above his tonsils. Without warning, the woman moved the tongue depressor and gently tapped one of the bumps, being rewarded with a thick, yellow liquid spraying from the bump and onto her glasses. After having the wooden stick removed from his throat, Izuku immediately began apologizing, only for Recovery Girl to wave him off, stating she'd been covered with worse as she used a tissue to clean off her glasses. Quietly she noted that the boy seemed surprised at the ability, but his mother paled at seeing the fluid come from her son's throat. Putting that thought in the back of her mind, Recovery Girl asked Izuku to stand and take off his shirt, to which the boy hastily complied. Walking behind the teen, Recovery Girl quickly noticed 2 large, purple arcing marks near Izuku's spine. As she traced the marks, she asked, "How long have you had these?" "They're birthmarks," Izuku stated, "I've always had them." "I see," the old woman said before stating, "Well, based on the physical examination and the footage from your test, I believe young Izuku has a transformation-type quirk." "Are you sure?" Inko questioned. "I understand what you've said about delayed manifestation, but even after the entrance exam my son hasn't shown any signs of a transformation quirk." In response, Recovery Girl pulled a small metal disc from her coat pocket. After a few seconds the device began to project an image, the recording of Izuku's entrance exam. Starting at the moment the boy had jumped to confront the 0-point enemy, the boy saw the moment his legs broke, along with something else. "I have wings." Izuku couldn't help but question aloud. "That and a few other characteristics." Recovery Girl spoke up as she explained. "I believe that was only a partial manifestation, you still haven't brought out the true power of your quirk." "How do I do that?" Izuku instantly questioned, wanting to be as powerful as possible to help as many people as possible. Getting back up, Recovery Girl motioned for the teen to turn around. As she stood in front of his back, the woman lectured. When transformation quirks first manifest, they usually cause children great pain as they are only partially complete, think of it like growing pains. To solve this problem, doctors researched ways to force a full manifestation. Through this research it was learned that if a bundle of nerves in a certain location are stuck with enough accuracy and force, the full manifestation of the quirk occurs, like so. From the corner of his eye, Izuku saw Recovery Girl hold her walking syringe up to the base of his spine in preparation to strike. Before either he or his mother could comment, the old woman struck. Instantly Izuku felt pain akin to having a tooth pulled out without Novocaine. However, that pain quickly passed as he caught his reflection in a nearby mirror. Although having grown a few inches, that wasn't the change that shocked him. What shocked the teen was the large pair of wings sprouting from his back, along with his clawed hands and green-scaled skin. His hair had also changed, moving from his head to the back of his neck and increasing in length to form a mane. His head was now occupied by a small backward frill along with 2 black horns that also pointed backwards, while his mouth had extended outwards to form a snout. Aside from that, a tail had sprouted from his lower back, the tip of which barely touched the floor. Before he could comment at the change, Izuku found himself choking on something. After a few loud coughs, the boy spit out a complete set of teeth. The teen was about to freak out, only to feel with his tongue that all his teeth had been replaced with round, pointed fangs. Finally finding his voice, which was slightly deeper than before, Izuku commented, "Are you sure this is a transformation quirk? It almost seems like a mutation to me. Put away your wings." Recovery Girl commented. Following the order, Izuku folded his wings and felt his muscles pushing the limbs back into his back. As his skin sealed itself back up to protect his wings, Izuku lost his newfound height as his claws and scales receded back below his skin as his hair came back to its usual length. Although his snout disappeared, the fanged teeth, however, remained, prompting the boy to wonder why. As if sensing the unsaid question, Recovery Girl stated, "Transformation quirks always have latent effects on the individual. In your case, your teeth and some latent super strength. Judging by the entrance exam, I also would hazard a guess that your lungs are larger than normal." Standing up, Recovery Girl continued, "You also seem to possess the extra organs usually used for spray-type quirks, probably for something fire-related. His father could breathe fire." Inko hesitantly admitted. "I see," was all Recovery Girl said as she began walking toward the front door. "In that case, be careful brushing your teeth. We wouldn't want you accidentally burning down your apartment, although you probably can only light the fluid when transformed." "Wait," Izuku suddenly questioned, "why couldn't I do any of this before? You said it may be a delayed quirk, but could there be something else?" Turning to face the boy, Recovery Girl answered, "It could be possible you've had your quirk all your life, but due to the misdiagnosis you believed yourself quirkless so strongly you created a mental block that didn't allow for any form of manifestation." The old woman then continued walk to the door as she stated, "In any case, I recommend continuing your training with Toshi Boy, specifically to strengthen your back muscles since you're not used to flying. Also, an increased protein intake wouldn't hurt. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to have Izuku's medical records transferred to my office." "Why?" Inko asked. "Even if he misdiagnosed my son, we haven't seen that doctor in years." "Oh, I just like to look after all the students in the hero program," Recovery Girl stated. Upon hearing the shocked silence from the Midoriya family, the old woman asked, "Did I ruin the surprise? In any case, I'll go ahead and forward the forms to proper list your quirk, along with the equipment request form. Have a good night." With that, the woman left. Once alone, Inko didn't hesitate to envelope her son in a bone-crushing hug. With happy tears freely flowing, the woman loudly declared, "I'm so happy for you, Izuku." "I'm happy too," Izuku replied with a smile before he realized this was the perfect opportunity to talk about something that had been bothering him. Disengaging from the hug, Izuku sat back down and asked, "Mom, can I ask you to do something?" "Sure, what is it?" Inko immediately asked. "Could you stop lying to me about my father?" While his mother was shocked into silence, Izuku continued, "The excuse that he has a job overseas, the fact we don't have any pictures of him, even his supposed name you used when you signed me up for school, it's obvious that he left us." By now Inko was about ready to cry tears of sadness at hearing how close to the truth her son had come, but what he said next brought her happiness, and I say good riddance to him. Looking directly into his mother's eyes, Izuku finished by saying, "Even when I was thought to be quirkless, you were the best mom in the world even as you tried to hide the fact I didn't have a father. So please, can we just admit that the man is a bastard not worth our time?" Chuckling, and wishing to call her ex much worse things, Inko once more hugged her son as she said, "I suppose that's not too big a task." Glad he hadn't saddened his mother too much, Izuku asked one more question, "I know it's selfish of me, but could you also worry a bit less about me and focus on your own health? I can take care of myself." Inko was about to reply that it was a mother's job to worry, but then remembered her last doctor's appointment. While there wasn't anything of immediate concern, there were a few areas of her general health that she could have done better on. Smiling even broader at her caring son, Inko asked, "I suppose that's not too much, granted you watch your language." After sharing a brief laugh, Inko asked her son, "When did you become such a wonderful young man?" "I don't know," Izuku answered honestly, "I just know I had an amazing parent to show me how." Finally letting go of her son, Inko walked to the kitchen to get dinner ready. Katsudon, Izuku's favorite to celebrate his admittance to UA, the woman saw her son head out the door to work out at the apartment gym until the food was ready. Once more the woman reflected on how great a person her son had turned into, and how thankful to be that aside from one aspect of his quirk, Izuku hadn't inherited anything else from his father. In Japan there existed a prison withheld from the public's knowledge. The prison housed individuals with destructive quirks and held little regard for human life. Due to this, most of the inmates were held in solitary confinement, only let out of their cells under heavy guard and only when absolutely necessary. In one such cell was an undescriptive man of average height wearing the standard prison uniform, his inmate number printed along his back. Before his head was shaved he used to have curly black hair, but now the only physical feature that set him apart from others was the light dusting of freckles upon his cheeks. The only other item that set him apart from the rest of the prisoners was the mask he was forced to wear, a metal contraption that he did not have the strength to rip off. The mask wasn't needed for medical reasons, rather it prevented him from using his quirk to harm others and to deliver a knockout gas should he even attempt to use his power. Like clockwork, a flap on the man's cell door opened inward as a tray slid across the floor, hitting his bed frame. A panel of his mask slid away to allow the man to eat and would slide back in half an hour. As the man ate the food provided, he remembered that he'd been locked up for over 14 years. 14 years to let him plan his escape, to let his anger burn. While he didn't have all the details mapped out, one thing was certain: he would not be spending another year in this prison, much less another 14. And when he got out, he was going to find that bitch and make her pay. After the eventful day yesterday, All Might had asked Izuku to meet him the following night. After finding his mentor at the beach he'd cleaned up, Toshinori congratulated the boy about his successful admittance into UA's hero program and explaining how with his awarded rescue points he'd earned 77 total points, tying for first in all exams. From there the man gave a short lecture about only using part of One for All's power, likening the usage to different power levels of a microwave, before asking Izuku a question he dreaded. "So you have a quirk all your own?" the skeleton-like man asked. Immediately Izuku bowed deeply as he apologized. "I'm sorry. My mom and I were told I didn't have a quirk, and then I was bullied constantly for it. Recovery girl says I created a mental block until the entrance exam, when I actually believed I had a quirk." Reaching down, Toshinori ruffled his apprentice's hair as he said, "Relax young Midoriya, you've done nothing wrong." He then grinned as he stated, "In fact most of the previous users of One for All had quirks of their own." "So you aren't mad?" Izuku asked, glad he hadn't let down the number 1 ranked hero. "As long as you use your power to protect others, I don't see anything wrong," Toshinori stated before asking, "Now, can you show me?" Nodding, Izuku took off his shirt and jacket, not wanting the clothing to be shredded by the transformation, and let his wings out. At seeing the change in the teen, Toshinori nodded as he stated, "Most impressive. Now Recovery Girl mentioned something about you breathing fire." With a grin, Izuku turned to the ocean. Taking a deep breath in, the boy squeezed the back of his throat to have his glands start producing the accelerant. Once he felt the liquid begin to fall onto his tongue, the dragon-powered boy exhaled at the same time, being sure to click his teeth to create a spark to ignite the mixture. For his efforts, Izuku created a medium-sized fireball that lasted for 10 seconds before burning out. "Most impressive indeed," All Might commented, shifting into his bulky form in the excitement. He then noticed a stray flame sticking on Izuku's chin and pointed it out to the boy by pointing to his own and saying, "You've got a little something right here." Nonchalantly, Izuku used his thumb to wipe the still burning fluid off his chin before flicking it onto the sand and stamping out the fire with his foot. As expected, his skin's also fireproof. All Might thought to himself before asking, "Okay then young Midoriya, why not show me some flying?" "Actually, I can't," the dragon boy admitted. "I can glide and crash just fine, but my wing muscles are still too weak for a proper takeoff or landing." "It can't be helped then." As he bent down, All Might held out his hand and said, "Come over here and I'll give you a boost." Smiling, Izuku quickly climbed onto the offered limb, only to be launched into the air seconds later. Unlike the last time he'd been flying with All Might, Izuku was actually enjoying this. A few barrel rolls, a corkscrew here, and a few quick turns thrown in for good measure to show All Might he knew how to fly with his wings. Despite the elation he was feeling, Izuku couldn't help but feel like his vision was beginning to darken. The next thing Izuku knew, he was back on the back, gasping for breath as his human self. He was also soaking wet. Before he could try to figure out what had happened, he heard Toshinori speak up. "You're awake, good. For a moment I thought you needed CPR and I figured you would have wanted someone a bit cuter for your first kiss." The man joked, now back to his skeletal appearance and just as wet as Izuku. Not understanding why he was suddenly back on the ground, the green-haired boy asked, "What happened?" "I would say you're just not used to flying." When Izuku gave him a confused look, Toshinori elaborated, "It looks like recovery girl's thoughts about your lungs being bigger is true, but your body isn't used to being at such a great height. The further up you go, the less oxygen is available. You went to a point where even with your enhanced lungs your body didn't have enough oxygen, so you passed out. Thankfully you crashed in the water and not on the dock." As his mentor was speaking, Izuku nodded along, absorbing each word, wishing he'd brought his notebook with him. "It's possible you can train your body past this hurdle, but for now you should probably request an oxygen tank." His lecture done, Toshinori ruffled Izuku's hair once more before stating, "Well, that's it for tonight. Run along home now, young Midoriya, you have school in the morning." As usual, nothing too eventful happened at school. Katsuki did brag to the class about his admittance to UA's hero program, and that he'd gotten the top score in the exam with 77 points, prompting Izuku to lightly chuckle. Unfortunately, that brought everyone's attention to him and someone remembered the green-haired teen had also applied to UA. From there the class practically demanded to know if he'd also gotten admitted, with many claiming it was impossible that the quirkless loser even showed up to the test. Although he'd really wanted to show off to his classmates, Izuku had decided to keep his quirk a secret for the time being. As such, he shared that he did show up to the exam, and that he knew he'd done well enough on the written portion to at least get into the school. However, as he'd yet to receive an acceptance letter, he did not know if he was in the hero course or not. While the class just denied the idea that Izuku had even gotten that far, Katsuki just remained silent and glared out the window. Thankfully class ended shortly after and Izuku had managed to make it home without any interruption. Grabbing the mail before heading upstairs to his apartment, Izuku wasn't shocked that his mom was running errands. As such, the boy quickly changed out of his uniform before sorting through the mail. Aside from the usual junk mail and a few bills, two things were addressed directly to Izuku. The first was the quirk registration form recovery girl had forwarded, while the second was for UA's support department, asking for the design of Izuku's uniform and gadgets. After quickly filling out the registration form, and putting it to the side for his mother to sign off on, Izuku once more looked over the equipment request form as he tried to figure out what he needed. It was at that time that Inko returned home, asking her son, "What are you doing?" "Just going through the mail," Izuku causally answered as he wrote down a request for a small oxygen tank and breathing mask like All Might suggested. "Well, I have a surprise for you," Inko said. As her son gave her his full attention, the woman reached into her bag and pulled out a one-piece, green jumpsuit with white details. At the question in her son's eyes, the woman stated, "I may have taken a peek in one of your notebooks and found a few sketches." Izuku was about to thank his mother but quickly realized those sketches were done before he'd awoken his own quirk, meaning the uniform wouldn't be useful. Seeing her son's smile dampen, Inko asked, "What's wrong, is it the wrong color?" "No, the color's fine," Izuku stated as he got up and head to the hall closet. "It's just that the jumpsuit doesn't really fit my quirk." As he finished speaking, Izuku found what he was looking for. Returning to the living room, the boy set the sewing kit down on the table as he said, "But I think we can fix that." Inko just smiled at her son as they got to work modifying the jumpsuit. She was going to mention that she felt guilty about possibly crushing her son's dream of becoming a hero back when he was so young, but seeing her boy smile as he worked beside her made the mother not wish to revisit those painful memories. Time almost seemed to move too fast. Before he knew it, Izuku had completed his exams, placing within the top 5 of the class, and beginning his summer break. During the few months before he began attending UA, the boy continued his workouts with All Might, although they became more spread out as other duties called the hero away. Nevertheless, the boy was making progress in not only controlling One for All, even if he had small fractures more often than not, and his own quirk. Takeoffs were becoming easier, but landings still posed a problem. Despite the training, the summer also came to an end quickly. Nervous anticipation filled Izuku as he put his usual red shoes on, yet now the boy wore the standard UA uniform, dark green pants with a white dress shirt and a gray suit jacket. He also had a red tie, but due to his own inexperience with such an article of clothing he ended up making it significantly shorter than it should be. As he shouldered his backpack, Izuku called back to his mom, "Alright, I'm heading out." "Izuku," his mother called from behind him. The boy turned to see what his mother wanted to say, ideally noticing she'd lost a bit of her extra weight now that she didn't worry about him as much and take better care of herself, along with Izuku repeatedly telling her that she'd never crushed his dream of being a hero, so there was nothing to feel guilty over. Looking over her son, Inko quickly smiled and said, "I'm really proud of you, son." Returning the smile, Izuku gave his mom a brief one-armed hug as he said, "I love you too, but I've got to leave right now or I'll be late." With that, the boy opened the door and stepped outside, ready not only to face his first day of high school, but also the next part in his journey to become a hero. After a short train ride, Izuku was once more on the campus of UA. Despite being here several times since the entrance exam, recovery girl wanting a complete and up-to-date physical from the aspiring hero, the teen couldn't help but be wowed by the school for heroes, especially since he was no longer limited by following a chaperone around. "Let's see," Izuku mumbled to himself as he wandered around the halls, not wanting to be late on his first day. Class 1A, where are you?" The teen soon found his answer when he saw a gigantic door with 1A painted upon it with bright, red, humongous letters. "Okay," the young man began to give himself a pep talk as he slowly approached the door. 40 students passed and we were divided into 2 classes. Odds are Kachan or the tall speedster won't be here. I can do this. As he opened the door, the shy teen paused to see that most of the class, including a familiar-looking head of pink hair, was already there, and was thankful their attention was on 2 of their fellow students. "Get your feet off the desk this instant," the taller, glasses-wearing teen demanded of Katsuki. In typical fashion, the bully ignored the order as he fired back, "You're kidding me, right? Did your old school put a stick up your ass, rich boy?" Seeing being direct wasn't going to work, the taller boy instead tried a different tactic. "Let's start over and try this again. I'm Tenya Iida from," only to be interrupted as the explosive teen stated with a grin, "I don't care where you're from, I'm still going to tear you to pieces." As he finished speaking, Katsuki turned to the door, ready to measure up the newest classmate only to glare upon seeing Izuku. "You would threaten me, your classmate?" Tenya demanded, only to notice Katsuki's loss of focus. Turning to see what had captured the blonde's attention, the taller teen himself noticed Izuku and remarked, "It's him." Now all of the class turned to see their new classmate as Tenya speed towards the shorter boy in a very robotic fashion as he said, "Hello, my name is Tenya." Having already heard the taller teen's name, Izuku politely cut him off as he said, "I already heard." He then swallowed the lump in his throat as he introduced himself, "I'm Izuku Midoriya." Stopping, and placing his arms at his side, Tenya regarded the other boy as he said, "Midoriya, I apologize for my previous behavior. You were far more observant than me and realized there was something more to the exam." Once more Izuku politely stopped the taller teen as he said, "Actually I didn't know about the rescue points until much later, I just saw someone who needed help and acted without thinking." Apparently the existence of rescue points had been unknown until then. While this tidbit didn't affect the 2 students in the class who had recommendations, nearly everyone else began breaking out into a loud conversation with those near them, debating how much rescue points affected their score. The only 2 who didn't join in the conversation were Tenya, who now stood in a corner of the room, scolding himself for not realizing the existence of the rescue points earlier, and Katsuki who just continued to glare at the once quirkless boy. With everyone now distracted, Izuku hoped he could make his way to his seat, only for a familiar figure to lean out of her chair and block his path. Mina gave a wide grin as she said, "Hello again Hiro-kun. So your name's Izuku?" At that point the spiky-haired, red-headed boy next to the pinkett spoke up, asking, "Mina, you know this guy?" Turning her attention to her friend, Mina rolled her eyes as she explained, "I told you Eijiro, remember? About the guy who stopped the thief from stealing my purse." "Oh, that was you." The now named Eijiro turned to Izuku, revealing his own set of pointed fangs. "Helping a damsel in distress. Now that is certainly manly. Who are you calling a damsel?" Mina demanded as she slapped the back of Eijiro's head. Izuku honestly tried to stop the argument before it became too heated, only for yet another new voice to make themselves known. Hey, I recognize that curly hair. Turning, Izuku found himself once more face to face with the girl he'd rescued during the entrance exam. While she began talking about how sure she was that Izuku would make it into the school and how awesome it was to see him take out the 0 point in a single hit, a detail that caught their classmates' attention, save for Bakugo who was busy plotting ways to torment his former friend, the green-haired boy had his own thoughts. Gosh, she looks great in that uniform. Then again, so does Mina. Not realizing the impact she was having on the others, the new girl continued to talk as she asked, so what do you think we're doing today besides orientation? I wonder what our teachers are like. I'm glad you asked, a sultry voice said from the doorway. At the entrance to the room stood a woman with blue eyes and long black hair. Most of her outfit seemed to be a skin-tight bodysuit that showed off her curves while the rest was a black corset-like item with a collar that went to her neck. On each of her wrists was half a handcuff while a red domino mask was seemingly glued to her face. Completing the woman's look was a pair of knee-high boots, black translucent thigh-high stockings, and a flogging whip. With a smile the woman introduced herself. I'm Nimari Kayama, otherwise known as the 18+ only hero, Midnight, and I'll be your class, homeroom teacher. Faintly Izuku heard one of his new classmates call out that the hero program was the best. Seemingly ignoring the outburst, Midnight continued as she asked, now, will everyone take their seats so that we may begin the day? Once the request was followed, the homeroom teacher began handing out a stack of paper to her students as she explained, this is a little icebreaker to get yourselves familiar with your classmates. Some of you may know each other from your previous schools, but it never hurts to have too many friends. Back as the podium, the woman hit a few unseen buttons that caused a holographic overlay to appear over the blackboard. The entire class, pictures and names being displayed while the hero explained, it's simple really, just match up your classmates with their quirks. This isn't graded, so there's no penalties for guessing. She then winked as she finished by saying, although get enough right and you might get a reward. Izuku felt as if he were in his element. After putting his name on his paper, he quickly found Bakugo's explosive and his own dragon form on the list before writing down the appropriate names. Next he focused on quirks he'd witnessed during the exam. Iida had a speed-related quirk, so the green-haired boy quickly scanned the list and wrote the boy's name down next to Engine. Following that he took a quick glance up to see the name of the blonde boy that he'd encountered during the exam, which turned out to be Yuga Aoyama. Remembering the rather unique beam attack, Izuku decided the boy's quirk was naval laser. Finally that just left the nice girl, who Izuku saw was named Ochako Uraraka. Reasoning that her quirk was gravity-based like his mother's, the boy wrote her name next to zero gravity. With those taken care of, the teen moved on to the second easiest task, that being the easiest quirks to deduce with little background research, mutations. As a mutation quirk affected the user's body since birth, it was nearly impossible to hide one's abilities. Thus it was easy to pair Mashiro Ojiro with tail, Mezo Shoji with dupli arms, Kyoka Jiro with earphone jack, and Toru Hagakure with invisibility. He also wrote Fumikage Tokiyami as having anavoice due to his bird-like head and paired Koji Koto with hardening because of his rock-like head, although for some reason he felt less sure about the last two. Lastly, he wrote Tsuyu Asui next to Frog due to her slumped, amphibian-like posture. With the obvious mutant quirks done, Izuku then moved on to the harder to figure out emitters and transformations. First was Mina Ishido. While many would assume her quirk was a mutation due to her unique appearance, Izuku remembered his brief encounter with her and her comment about not wanting to ruin her shoes, thus he reasoned she had an emitter-type quirk, and a destructive one at that, so he wrote her name next to Acid. Next was Minoru Mineta, whose odd-shaped hair seemed to be suited for pop-off, although the boy wasn't sure if the quirk was actually a mutate or emitter. Next he guessed that Denkai Kaminari had electrification based on his bright hair color and black lightning bolt-like streak. The teen used a similar logic to pair Shoto Todoroki with half-cold half-hot due to the boy's half-white, half-red hair. After pairing up over half the class with their quirks, Izuku now had only 4 people left, but also the 4 most vague quirks. Okay, let's see, the teen began trying to reason things out in his head. Dark Shadow definitely sounds like an emitter but could also be a transformation. Transformation quirks often have latent, visible clues, like my teeth. Remembering seeing someone with a similar set of teeth, Izuku guessed Eijiro Kirishima. Okay, 1 down, 3 to go. He then looked at the next listed quirk. Sugar Rush. Definitely an emitter. Sounds like a temporary power boost, but to be effective one would already need a strong baseline. Glancing around at the 3 remaining contenders, it was easy to see Rikido Sato was easily the most physically fit. Now down to the last 2 names and quirks. Hanta Siro and Momo Yaoyorozu. Tape and creation. Really, could those 2 quirks have been any vaguer? To further complicate things, neither teen had any unique physical features that would hint who had what. Alright then. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Taking a chance, Izuku settled for guessing Momo had tape while the process of elimination left Hanta with creation. Despite taking around 30 minutes to fill out his sheet, the fire breather wasn't the last to finish. Instead, quite a few others were desperately trying to finish filling in their answer sheets, having drastically overthought it more than Izuku. Shortly afterwards, Midnight called an end to the test and collected the papers before feeding them into a scanner built into the podium. Giving a quick review of the results, the heroine announced, as expected, some of you already knew each other or observed your classmates' abilities during the test, averaging about 4 to 6 correct answers. However, one of you must have a keen mind, able to successfully deduce 15 quirks. As for the lowest score, Midnight hit a few buttons to display the answer sheet, the person's name covered by a black bar, yet it was obvious whose paper it was due to only correctly having Bakugo listed next to explosion while every other answer was listed as extra. Once the instructor had finished speaking, the class began to talk once more, the students turning to their neighbors and trying to figure out who had scored the highest. However, Midnight quickly brought the teens' focus back to her as she struck the podium with her whip. Now, the woman began, I could tell you all the answers, or I could let everyone show off. Which would you prefer? Many in the class had a matching grin with the heroine at the prospect of demonstrating their quirks. After Midnight had led the class to the locker rooms to change into their PE uniforms, the teacher then took them to the outdoor track. Now, we have one last test before we start the tour of UA. I need to know everyone's baseline ability to better teach you, so we must have a quirk assessment test. Quirk assessment test. Practically the whole class silently questions, never hearing of such a thing before. As if knowing the question, Midnight began to explain, you see, the Department of Education has been testing everyone at a baseline, thus you were forbidden from using your quirks. She then gained a predatory smirk as she stated, but that changes today. Bakugo, what was your record for the softball toss? I don't know, about 67 meters. The teen answered before having to act fast to catch a softball with an embedded tracker. Motioning to the painted circle on the ground behind her, Midnight challenged, why don't you try a throw with all your might? In response, Katsuki gained a grin of his own as the red-eyed teen stepped into the space. Winding up in a perfect pitch, the teen gave it his all as he cried out, die. While an explosion helped to propel the ball further than ever before, Midnight holding out her phone to show the teen's new personal best was 705.2 meters. While the students would normally be frightened at seeing such a powerful display, instead they were all pumped up and ready to go, Izuku hearing several of his classmates saying the test looked like fun. Midnight, evidently, also heard those comments. Fun you say? The woman challenged. Let's make this clear that these tests are not games, that your abilities could mean the difference between life or death, that your actions will have consequences. Although she had now scared the class, the hero didn't let up as she declared, unlike before, you must perform at your best. She paused to bring up a chart of everyone in the class, Bakugo's score being recorded, because while the highest score won't receive a prize, the lowest, well, let's just say it's best not to think about it. With that, the woman began to lead the group to the first test, the 50-meter race. The test was comprised of a 2-person race, meaning the class went through it relatively fast in 10 races. Although most students just ran the race normally with a bit of help from their quirks, such as Uchiko using zero gravity to remove the weight of her clothes, there were a few standout moments. Tenya had breezed past Suyu with a time of just over 3 seconds, although the frog girl posted a respectable time of just under 6 seconds by completing the race in 5 great hops. Yuga had the rather unique strategy of jumping up and firing his naval laser, allowing the recoil to launch him down the lane, although for some reason the laser gave out halfway through. allowing Mina to catch up, overtake, and beat her opponent before he had the chance to fire his laser again. When it was Izuku's turn to run, he ended up being paired against Bakugo. As expected, the blonde used his quirk to his full advantage, having a series of twin explosions from his hands to propel him down the lane. Due to his increased lung capacity, Izuku surprised himself as he kept pace with his one-time friend, finishing just over 4.13 seconds. As the two boys were the last to run the race, Midnight moved them onto a solo activity, grip strength. As everyone began to squeeze the measuring tools, Izuku debated if now was the time to unleash one for all. Despite his training, the boy still ended up breaking bones more often than not. Thankfully, Recovery Girl was available to heal the teen, although she began to express her irritation that the green-haired boy was becoming such a frequent patient. As he observed Mezzo use 3 of his 6 arms to gain a score of 540 kilograms, and Rikido eat a few packets of sugar to gain a similar score, the teen decided not to use the destructive quirk so early in the tests. Instead, he relied upon his own strength, posting a score of 200 kilograms, unknowingly beating many of his classmates. Next, the class moved to the standing long jump. As expected, many of the class landed near the end of the sandbox, although both Bakugo and Yuga used their quirks to clear the area altogether. Afterwards was the sidestep, which only had 1 breakout star. Surprising everyone, Mineta tore off several of the spheres from his head, stacking them beside the test area before quickly allowing himself to be bounced between the 2 stacks at a high velocity, posting the only exceptionally high score for the test. Unfortunately, the small boy didn't have much time to relish the victory as everyone moved on to the next test, the softball toss. The softball toss was perhaps the test that had the single most diverse results. While many students could use their quirks and achieved results around 500 meters, many more did not have such physical enhancements and many only reached around 70 meters. The spotlight, however, belonged to Uchiko, who used zero gravity to rob the ball of its gravitational pull, causing the ball to gently rise into the sky. A few moments later, Midnight displayed her phone to show the result of the test as an infinity symbol, to the great shock of the class that such a feat was possible. While the class congratulated the girl on her achievement, Izuku stepped forward for his turn. Now was the time, the boy decided, the time to unleash one for all. Yet as he wound up for the pitch, pink filled his vision before darkness overcame the boy. Slowly, Izuku came back to the world of the living. Although his eyes were closed, the boy felt that his head was slightly elevated, on something soft. As he tried to piece together what was happening, he heard Midnight say, "You know, it's not fair to the others." Opening his eyes, the teen found himself resting on his teacher's lap. As he immediately scrambled to stand up, the woman continued, "They are giving it their all to prove they belong here, going beyond the limits of their quirks. Meanwhile, you've just been skating by, not taking any opportunity to showcase your talent." Standing herself, Midnight began walking back to the class as she said, "I've seen the video of your entrance exam, I know what you're capable of. This is your reward for doing so well on the Icebreaker Challenge, a second chance to show us why you belong here. Fail and I'll have you expelled before the day is done." As he now stood alone in the circle, Izuku began to think on his teacher's words. While Midnight had her chat with Izuku, on the sidelines the students began having a chat of their own. If he doesn't shape up, Izuku's going to place last. Why doesn't he use his quirk? Tenya wondered aloud. "What are you talking about glasses?" Bakugo demanded. "Deku's always been a pathetic, quirk-less loser. You didn't see what he did in the exam, did you?" Uraraka asked. The explosion user opened his mouth to demanded what the girl meant, only for their attention to be drawn to Mina when she released loud wolf whistle. Seeing what had captured the girl's attention, the trio looked back at Izuku to see a shocking sight. It appeared the teen finally came up with a game plan. Bakugo seethed as his one-time friend took off his jacket and shirt, showcasing well-defined muscles that he definitely didn't have in middle school. The boy's anger grew even more when a pair of wings popped out of Izuku's back, starting the transformation that ended with the bipedal, green dragon standing in boy's place. At seeing the transformation, a hush fell over the class. Bakugo was about to charge forward and demand answers, only for Izuku to spread his wings and take off with a large gust of wind. The dragon boy flew straight up, until he was almost a speck in the sky. Vaguely the class could see a shift in color from the teen, from green to gold, before he threw the ball, then half falling, half gliding back down to the ground, landing roughly in the marked circle. While most of the class were amazed at the incredible display, some noticed that 3 of Izuku's fingers appeared to be dislocated or broken, a marked improvement to his injuries from the entrance exam thanks to training with All Might. Izuku himself broke the silence, asking Midnight, "It counts as long as I don't leave the circle, right?" As he waited for a response, the boy took a deep breath to brace himself before pulling 2 of his fingers back into joint. His pointer finger was definitely broken and would require a splint or a trip to recovery girl. Nodding as she smiled, the teacher said, "Yes it does, and I didn't say anything about flying. Too bad you didn't use your quirk earlier, you could have gotten a better score on the long jump." She then showed her class her phone, revealing Izuku's score to be 1103 meters, a score second only to Uraraka's. Midnight couldn't help but smile. With some encouragement her student had gone beyond the limits of his quirk, plus ultra. While the majority of the class stood shocked at the feat, someone had a different reaction. "Deku!" Katsuki yelled as he charged forward. "Explain yourself, you useless piece of shit, before I kill you." However, before he could get anywhere near the boy, Midnight acted to restrain her student. A quick kick to the blonde's shin put him off balance. Grabbing his wrist gave her full control of his momentum, which she used to put the teen in the ground. While the boy was stunned, the heroine grabbed and forced his free arm behind the boy's back before using her whip to hold them together. Finally she placed her foot between Bakugo's shoulder blades. While the teen may have been physically stronger than his teacher, Midnight's technique and skill had won the skirmish. As the bully continued to struggle against Midnight, Izuku calmly put his wings away, transforming back into a green-haired boy before putting his shirt on and tying his jacket at the waist to cover the tear in his pants that his tail had created. As he walked back towards the class, Izuku gave his one-time friend a rare glare as he said, "I don't have to explain anything to you, Kachin, but I will anyway. There are rare cases of transformation quirks, often misdiagnosed ones, taking years to fully manifest. I've always had a quirk, but because everyone told me I didn't, I believed that so strongly that my mind wouldn't allow a transformation into my dragon form, not until I overcame my mental block." By now Bakugo had ceased his struggling. Sensing that her student wasn't going to start any more trouble, Midnight began to slowly loosen the impromptu restraints, but was ready to use her own quirk if necessary. Thankfully it turned out not to be needed as Bakugo slowly got up, meeting Izuku's glare with one of his own before he clicked his teeth and stated, "Doesn't matter what you've got. You're still the useless Deku, and I'm going to surpass you and everyone else." With that the 2 boys returned to their classmates, although each went to a different end of the group. Although the excitement was still palpable, Midnight did her job and lead the class to their next test, the seated toe touch. As expected, many of the students gave an average performance while a few mutant quirks, such as Suyu's frog and Ojiro's tail, allowed the teens to stand out due to their unnaturally flexible bodies. After that test were the sit-ups. Unlike the previous tests, no one student had a quirk that put them at an advantage, instead the results were all due to physical training. That said, Midnight had to put a stop to the test after 15 minutes when Izuku, Bakugo, Shoji, and Sato got into an impromptu contest that showed no signs of ending. All of this led to the last test, the endurance run. Alright, Midnight began as the class assembled around an Olympic-sized track. "I know you all must be tired, but this is the last test of the day, the endurance run. You will be judged on how long you are able to maintain a consistent speed. You are all wearing sensors that will let me know if you fall below the baseline speed, at which point your time will stop. As with the other tests, you are free to use your quirks however you wish, with the exception of Miss Yaoyorozu." Directing her attention solely on the mentioned student, Midnight explained, "You can create anything without a motor, this is a physical test after all. Now, is there anyone who thinks their quirks will hamper the efforts of your classmates?" Immediately Tenya raised his hand, Mina, Mineta, and Todoroki following at a much slower pace. Nodding, Midnight directed the students, "Alright then, Iida take the outside lane, Todoroki take the one next to it followed by Mina and Mineta. Everyone else is free to run where they may, just avoid those tracks. Now please take your places." With that the students took their place, although Momo paused to unzip her jacket before using her quirk to transform some of her body fat into a bicycle, which slowly emerged from her toned stomach. Once everyone was set, Midnight cracked her whip to signal everyone to start. As expected, Tenya used his engine to boost ahead of the pack. In the lane next to him, Shoto was using the ice half of his quirk to create a sheet of ice in front of him, showing great control in keeping the effects of his power in the narrow lane. From there, the red and white-haired boy slid forward to the end of his lane, only stopping his creation of ice at the beginning of the turn to avoid tripping. Mina had a similar strategy, using her quirk to fill her lane with a slippery slime that let her slide forward with minimal effort, although she too had to be careful not to trip on the corner. Mineta had the most unique strategy, pulling the balls off his head and throwing them ahead of himself. Once the short teen approached the first of his balls, he hopped on it and allowed the object to bounce him forward to the next ball, and so on. The rest of the class was a bit of a mess. Momo easily put herself in front of the rest of the class with her bike. Katsuki, however, was right behind her, skipping instead of running and using his explosion to propel himself forward, Izuku right behind him. The boy had thought of using his wings in a similar way, but ultimately decided he didn't have enough experience with his quirk to pull it off. Following behind the pair was Suyu, who lazily hopped along just ahead of the pack. The rest of the class was a chaotic mess with people just barely dodging elbows. As expected, the first student to falter was from the pack. After 20 minutes of a steady pace, Rikido Sato fell below the required speed, showing that while the sugar-powered hero had great strength, he needed to improve his endurance. Shortly afterwards, Mineta faltered as well, misjudging his landing and completely overshooting his intended ball, the small boy's momentum being enough to carry his body forwards, skidding for a ways until Midnight's phone registered the boy as out. Following Mineta's misstep, the next person out was from the pack, Hantashiro, losing his breath and bowing out. Following the tape user, Fumikage Tokiyami also called it quits. This seemed to open the floodgates as more students felt the need to stop. Koji Koda, Mezzo Shoji and Yuga Aoyama all stopped at practically the same time, followed by Denki Kaminari and Kyoka Jiro stopping as well, although Jiro teased Kaminari that she lasted longer, even if it was just a bit. Following that, the latest batch, Midnight's phone remained silent for 5 minutes until it beeped once more to alert her that Toru Hagakure had stopped moving, not that anyone could tell in the sea of gym uniforms. Shortly after, another alert sounded to inform the instructor that Ochako Uraraka had also reached her limit. A few minutes of silence later, and Eijiro Kirishima also bowed out, heading over to the ever-increasing group of students to watch the rest of the class, a small betting pool going on who would last the longest. Mashirao Ojiro soon followed. Surprising many, the next elimination was from the outer lane groups. Mina Ishido let her slime go a bit too far ahead of herself, slipping and falling as she tried to round the turn. After quickly pulling her legs out of Shoto's path, the pink-skinned girl gingerly picked herself up and walked back to the class as a collection of IOUs changed hands. She was soon joined by Shoto Todoroki, who instead of tripping had stopped himself, his overuse of the cold portion of his quirk giving him a severe case of shivers that would take some time to settle. To everyone's great surprise, Tenya Yielda also stopped himself from running. No doubt the teen would have won the race in terms of speed, but after running so long his internal engines were beginning to overheat, thus the boy felt it was time to stop. With the students narrowed down to the finally 3, the class's attention was focused on the trio, each student having labored breathing. After seeing his performance in the previous tests, it came as a surprise when Katsuki Bakugo was the next to stop, although he was not as graceful as those before him. Instead of coming to a calm stop, the boy collapsed from exhaustion, Rikido and Mezzo having to go out and grab the boy, who kept yelling he could keep going. Now the last 2 students remaining were Izuku and Momo. Although the taller teen had lapped Izuku multiple times and had given herself the advantage of creating a light-framed racing bike, no one could be sure who would last the longest. This was proven when Momo Yaoyorozu pulled on her handbrake before popping out her kickstand and slowly dismounting her bike before walking towards the group. As the last one standing, the group weren't surprised to see Izuku taking a victory lap, but they began to wonder what the teen was thinking when he took another lap, and then another. When the green-haired boy passed by the group a 5th time, it became obvious that he wasn't paying attention to the group and was instead hyper-focused on his task. Upon realizing this, Midnight spoke up and said, "Well, it can't be helped, his result doesn't change who's in last anyway." Switching her phone to a projection mode, the instructor showed the class that Mineta had scored the lowest combined score. Seeing the boy shake in fear, Midnight had a predatory grin as she stated, "We'll discuss your punishment later, but right now let's continue the tour." As the class began to walk away, Iida raised his hand and asked, "Sensei, is it really alright to let Midoriya continue running?" Waving off the concern, Midnight explained, "It's fine, young Midoriya knows his way or the campus fairly well already." When several students loudly asked what, the woman stated, as he himself explained, it was thought he was quirkless until recently. Although he passed the entrance exam, Principal Nezu was concerned the boy is too inexperienced with his sudden power to use it safely, so he extended an invitation for summer tutoring, but enough about that. She then tapped her chin and pondered, "I suppose Mr. Iida is right that we shouldn't let the boy run himself ragged." "Yaoyorozu, stopwatch please." The girl complied, creating one in the palm of her hand before presenting it to the teacher. "Right, now I need a volunteer to watch over the boy." Not many raised their hands to volunteer to miss out on the tour, although 3 teens did. Mineta raised his hand to try and escape his punishment, something Midnight easily saw through. Yet she did smile when the other 2 hands raised at almost the same moment. "Well, since you two are so quick to volunteer, you can keep an eye on him together." Tossing the stopwatch to Mina, the teacher stated, "Don't let him run for more than 15 minutes, afterwards have him show you where the cafeteria and nurse's office is." With that, Midnight lead the majority of Class 1A back into the main building. Left alone, Mina and Ochako stayed silent as they watched Izuku run another lap around the track, not sure what to talk about. Finally, Mina spoke up as she asked, "So why did you want to talk to him?" "He saved me from being crushed by the 0 point during the exam." Ochako simply stated, causing Mina to whistle. "Wow, no one in my group went up against that thing. Think UA will release the video?" The Pinkett didn't give the gravity manipulator a chance to reply as she continued, "Sounds better than my reason. I actually met him last year when he stopped a guy from stealing my purse, but I never got a chance to properly thank him. Seems like he's got the right mindset for a hero, might just become the greatest." Ochako commented, Mina nodding her head in agreement. Once more the pair stood in silence, a much more comfortable this time. As Izuku unknowingly approached his time limit, Mina watched as he once more passed by, his heavy breathing being the only sign he was even remotely struggling. Thinking aloud, the acid user said, "Say, he has this much endurance, I wonder what else Hiro-kun can do for a long time." The pair were silent for a moment as they digested the words. Uraraka seemed to catch a hidden meaning and quickly blushed. Mina noticed this and was quick to wave her hands and defend herself, practically yelling, "I didn't mean it like that." Thankfully the stopwatch chose that moment to go off, telling the girls it was time to stop Izuku from running. Wanting to distance herself from an embarrassing conversation, Uraraka went to tell the boy it was time to stop, only for Mina to rest a hand on the other girl's shoulder and ask, "Hey, want to do something fun?" Izuku didn't know what happened. He was lost in his head deciphering his classmates' quirks while he ran, until he felt his footing slip and his body falling backwards. Instinctively he flailed his arms out to try and regain his balance, only to notice he was completely weightless. As he tried to figure out his current situation, a loud laugh caught his attention. Turning his head, the boy spied Mina doubled over, some slime still in her hand, while Ochako was covering her mouth trying to contain her laughter. "Sorry Hiro-kun," Mina began when she finally got her laughter under control, "but we didn't feel like chasing after you to let you know Midnight Sensei decided you weren't in last place. She also mentioned that you could show us where the important parts of the school are." Ochako threw in as she deactivated her quirk. "Alright, I guess we should head over to Recovery Girl's office first," Izuku stated as he led the girls inside. The Dragon Boy's version of a tour was much shorter than Midnight's official version. The boy pointed to Principal Nezu's office as they passed by, as well as the entrance to the cafeteria, which was unused today as it was a special half-day for the new student orientation, which also explained the emptiness of the halls. After a few more minutes the trio arrived at the nurse's office. Once inside, Izuku quickly explained to the nurse how he'd broken his finger during the test. While the older woman offered to use her quirk to heal the digit, Izuku opted to instead only have the injured finger placed in a splint since he didn't want to abuse the nurse's healing abilities so early in the semester. It also didn't hurt that his dragon side gave him slightly accelerated healing, so he'd be fine in a day or two. After the visit to the nurse, the dismissal bell rang, so Izuku left the girls at the locker room to get changed back into their regular uniforms before quickly changing himself and heading outside to begin his walk towards the station. Man, was today tiring. The boy would have continued his mental monologue, had a hand clapped on his shoulder, stopping him in his tracks. With a slight hesitation, the boy turned around to see Iida. While Izuku expected many different responses from the taller boy, he was surprised when the speedster instead asked, "How is your finger?" Blinking owlishly a few times, Izuku finally responded, "It's alright. It should heal up fine by itself, and I didn't want recovery girl getting too angry with me this soon." "That's good to hear," Iida commented before folding his arms as the two resumed walking. "I was a little concerned that out homeroom teacher is a hero like Midnight Sensei, but I trust in the school's decisions. UA is the top program after all." While the glasses-wearing teen continued to talk about the school, Izuku couldn't help but think, he's not really that scary, just really serious about his studies. Izuku opened his mouth to continue the conversation, only to hear another voice call out, "Hey, wait up, horn buddy." Turning, the pair saw Mina rushing towards them, dragging along Kirishima. When the two other students got closer, Izuku couldn't help but ask, "Horn buddy?" "Yep," Mina proudly exclaimed as she pointed to her own horns. "You do know that you've got horns when you go all dragon, right?" The girl didn't give Izuku a chance to respond as she continued talking. "This guy just styles his hair to look like horns, but it works with his quirk. Besides, you know what they say, all us horny people have to stick together." The pink-skinned girl didn't seem to realize what she said as Iida's mouth fell open with a startled gasp while Izuku's face turned a cherry red. After a few moments, the girl seemed to realize her inadvertent double entendre when Kirishima could no longer hide his snickers. Hitting her friend, Mina yelled, "That isn't even remotely what I meant, and you know it." Thankfully, the girl was saved from further embarrassment when yet another new voice called out, "Hey, are you guys going to the station? Wait up and I'll join you." Soon the group saw Ochako rushing to catch up. While Iida muttered about her being the Infinity Girl, the gravity manipulator caught her breath before formally introducing herself, "I'm Ochako Uraraka." "Let's see." She paused as she nodded to each member of the group and said, "You're Tenya Iida, I know you're Mina Ishido, you must be Eijiro Kirishima, and you're..." Once more she paused before declaring, "Deku, right?" "Deku." Izuku quickly called out, hoping Kacchan hadn't already started spreading that horrible nickname. "Yeah," Ochako replied, unaware that anything was wrong. "Isn't that what Bakugo called you during the quirk test?" "Well, you see, my name's actually Izuku," the boy explained. "Deku is just something Kacchan calls me to make fun of me." Instantly the girl became apologetic as she said, "I'm sorry, I didn't realize that." She then brought a hand to her chin as she thought aloud, "Still, I kinda of like it. Deku is a never give up vibe to it and sounds kind of cute." "Deku it is then," Izuku quickly said, his face once more changing to a deep red. While Iida was questioning how Izuku could change his mind so fast, Kirishima was once more reduced to sniggers, and Mina had something else on her mind. "Well, if you want to be called Deku, fine, but you better start calling me Mina," the girl told her new horn buddy. "All right, Ishido," the boy began, only to be stopped by the girl. "No, no, no," Mina ordered as she stepped into Izuku's personal space, grabbing his jaw as she said, "Now say it with me. M-I na, M-I na, M-I na." With each pronounced syllable of her name, the girl moved the boy's jaw to open his mouth, giving the appearance of him talking. "You get this yet?" Immediately Izuku nodded, causing a number of laughs to break out in the group as they began their track towards the train station, this time without any more interruptions. The joyous conversation lasted until the group reached the station. Unfortunately, it turned out each student had to take a different train home, resulting in the group separating. After a brief train ride, the boy walked the rest of the way to the apartment building. Upon entering, he was sure to take off his shoes, noticing that his mother's pair were already put away. As he entered the living room, Izuku called out, "Mom, I'm home." After hearing several wooden objects clatter in his mom's bedroom, the boy was tempted to go see if something was wrong, only for Inko to appear in the doorway looking no worse for wear. Sharing her son's smile, the woman greeted her son, Izuku, how was your orientation? It was all right, a few people were really impressed with my quirk and I made a few new friends. The teen easily replied before asking his own question, how was your day? You weren't stuck in the house all day, were you? Oh no, Inko waved off her son's concerns, I actually spent most of my day running errands. But enough about that, why don't you tell me about these new friends while you help make dinner? That's all for now. If you enjoyed, then please like, share and do comments. Once more Izuku smiled. Despite awakening his dormant quirk, some things never changed in the Midoriya household. Even with his life thrown in upheaval by inheriting One for All, even with the possibility of potentially becoming the hero of his generation, the boy could honestly say some of his favorite moments were the simple ones spent at home.